So, it occurs to me that if you don't know me in real life, you might not have heard me tell my really embarrassing John Lithgow story. I don't like to talk about it, except then sometimes I find myself ill-advisedly telling the story to people I find attractive, and then they just kind of stop flirting with me entirely. Which is understandable, because much of this story revolves around me nearly peeing myself and making a public nuisance / humiliation of myself on the New York subway with the assistance of my friends and also John Lithgow. So, you know, and as Jet has pointed out, he was wearing a beret at the time, which kind of just makes the whole thing even worse. It's a horrible story, but I feel like, you know, I should tell it, at least, so I have something to, like, link to when people are like, but why does John Lithgow make you have to pee? No, this is true. This is true. People start talking about John Lithgow, and I'm like, excuse me. And I'm like, excuse me. You'll get that by the end of this video, I promise. Okay, so anyway, so we were in New York a couple of spring breaks ago it was spring break, we wanted to go to New York. One of our friends needed help moving, we wanted to see some of our East Coast friends, whatever. So we ended up in New York, trying to get to the, Natural History Museum, because it was like our last day in New York before we went back to Massachusetts. But we got on the wrong train. We got on an express train instead of the train we wanted to be on. Which is unfortunate because before we left our hotel, I had to pee, but I thought, okay, well, we'll be there soon, I'll just pee at the Natural History Museum, right? It's gotta be less skeevy than, you know, wherever the fuck we are now. I was wrong. I should have peed then. This entire story could have been avoided if I'd been like, hey, hold up, guys, I gotta pee. Instead, we rode through, like, half of Manhattan, and I had to pee, and then we went past our stop, and I was about to fucking burst. Like, I was really close to pissing myself in this subway train. And so we got off at the next stop, which was, like, Central Park or something. Like, the north end... north? Whatever. It was one of the ends of Central Park we'd been at, and so I knew that there was a Starbucks there. I knew that there was a Starbucks there with a public restroom. So, like, we got... I don't even remember what happened exactly. I and my cousin, Tumblr user Hazy Marie Vana, we ran up and out of the station so that I could get to that fucking Starbucks and pee before I, like, pissed all over the ground of the subway station. Like, seriously, it was bad. I've never been in that much pain from having to pee before. It was horrible. This is a horrible experience. It would have been horrible enough without what was about to happen. God. Okay, and so we go up there and I pee, and this is, like, the best thing that's ever happened. But on the way out of the station, you know, we shouted to our friends. We got separated by a crowd because we had a large group. We shouted to our friends that I had to pee and we were going to go up to the Starbucks, and we would, you know, be right back. I guess they didn't hear us? Yeah. So, when we got back down there, we couldn't find them. Like, we figured if they'd been freaking out, right, they would have left the station, gone somewhere they could actually get cell reception, like, above ground, and, like, called us. No, what did they do? They stayed underground, freaking out. So when we got back there, okay, our friend Gloria is just completely freaking out. We find them at the train platform for the, you know, the trains that'll go back, take us to the actual Natural History Museum instead of, like, the other side of Central Park. And, like, she's freaking out, and she just starts yelling at us. She just starts yelling at us about how, like, we can't just wander off, and, like, she has kids. Like, we didn't take the kids with us. I don't know what she's fucking freaking out about. And so I expressed this to her in the least polite way possible, because, like, I almost peed myself. I thought this was a little more important than her inability to, like, walk up the fucking stairs to where she could call us. And so we got in a big, like, screaming fight about it in the middle of the subway platform, and I cannot imagine how awkward this must have been for the people around us, but, like, I started crying, and I was just like, I had to pee! And she was like, I have kids! And it was just like, we were all stating really obvious things, and we're, like, grouped in sort of this semicircle around each other, and, like, I'm sorry, this story! So we're grouped in, like, this semicircle around each other, and, like, well, a train pulls up, and all of a sudden there's this dude pushing his way through our crowd of friends, and he's like, excuse me, and he walks right in the middle of the argument, like, pushing us apart, physically pushing us apart and interrupting our argument, and just walks in front of us to, like, get on the train. And, like, my cousin Ivana, she's like, hey, I think that was John Lithgow, and I shout, I don't care about famous people! Which, needless to say, also caused some issues in terms of everyone staring at us. God, and then because of an incident earlier in the trip, Vonna then leaned to her sister Mo, she's my cousin, her sister Mo, and said, hey, that's not, Zachary Quinto. And so Mo leaned into the train where John Lithgow was sitting and said, oh no, that's not Zachary Quinto at all. And meanwhile, Gloria and I are still, like, yelling and crying at each other, while, like, David, her, boyfriend, I'm gonna go with, the guy she lives with and has a kid with, well, he holds on to the kids, and, like, me and Gloria are just screaming at each other. And, I don't even remember how this fight ended. I think it was just because Vonna and Mo started, like, cracking up. No, and then John Lithgow comes back up. John Lithgow comes back onto the platform and is like, are you coming? And we're like, what? Well, I was not like, what? I was still yelling at Gloria and trying not to cry about the fact that I almost just pissed myself in front of what felt like all of New York City. It was not. It was just everyone on that extremely crowded train. That extremely crowded, jostly, bumpy train. And we're like, what? No, we'll take the next one. And as it turned out later, we finally figured out the problem. We got to the Natural History Museum, like, 5 seconds after it closed. I swear to God, it was horrible. Gloria ate a terrible hot dog, and I sat down and had a caffeinated beverage, and we stopped yelling so much at each other. But, like, it turned out later that we would have gotten to the museum on time if we'd gotten on the train that John Lithgow demanded to know if we were coming on with him. So, this is my embarrassing story about how I nearly peed myself and then got into a big public fight with a friend, and then John Lithgow tried to defuse the fight by making sure we got to our destination on time. We were screaming pretty loudly, so I assumed that he knew we were headed to the Natural History Museum. And I also assumed that he knew all sorts of things about my lack of bladder control. And also that Gloria has kids. Those kids there, they were hers. Yeah. It means you can't wander off. Because something bad might happen to the kids while we're away from the group. I don't know. I don't know. I'm still a little angry about it. But, like, this is what happened, and this is why talking about John Lithgow makes me need to pee, and this is why whenever I start watching old episodes of Third Rock with the Sun, I'm just staring at him and thinking, the next time he tells me to get on a train, I'm gonna get on a train. Yeah. And he's not Zachary Quinto, in case you were wondering. We ran into a lot of famous people on that trip, and we were really obnoxious tourists about it, I'm sad to say. And by really obnoxious tourists, I mean I repeatedly screamed, I don't care about famous people! It was a dark time in all of our lives. And so that is the story. That is the story of how John Lithgow makes me need to pee, and how I don't care about famous people, and how excuse me is an appropriate way to break up an argument, and all sorts of things. And how Gloria has kids, and you can't just wander off, because she has kids. They're with her. Yeah. It's my delightful, embarrassing story that I like to tell the people I find attractive, because I apparently like to sabotage myself. So in case you ever ask, I will link you to this video, and you will watch this video to this point, unless you don't, in which case you won't be hearing me say this. Okay, yeah.